Thank you, everybody. Welcome to our seminar. We're absolutely delighted to have a guest visiting from Michigan in the USA, Kate Sonka, who is Executive Director of Teach Access. Thank you, everybody who's joining online. We really appreciate you being with us too. So Kate's going to give her presentation, and then we're going to open to questions and answers from the floor, and we're hoping to give good time for lots of discussion, and that includes people joining online. So if you have questions through the presentation, please keep those ready for our Q&A section, or post them in the chat, and I will be happy to read those out or revoice them for you. We have BSL interpreting, also captioning available, so we're hoping that that will give a fairly seamless experience for everybody. But the only other thing I should say is that Kate is a guest of my project, which is Teaching Accessibility in the Digital Skill Set. We are funded by UK Research and Innovation, based here in Southampton Education School at the Centre for Research and Inclusion. And yes, we're delighted that we're bringing a colleague who represents an organisation looking at industry, workforce development, higher education, and accessibility, and that are such strong allies to us in trying to promote a mission of looking at pedagogy in this space. But I won't hold things up too much longer. Welcome, Kate. Welcome to Southampton, and over to you.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay? Mic's working? Great. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Really happy, really thrilled to be here with you all today. Everyone online, thank you for joining as well. I do have some notes here, so you'll see me referring to make sure that I don't miss anything here, but I really do hope that this can be conversational throughout. So if there is a burning, pressing question for clarification at any point, please feel free to raise your hand or send that through and we can get to that. But I welcome those questions and comments at the end. So a big thank you to Sarah and the whole team and the project for having me here and hosting over the past few days. I arrived on Thursday, so the jet lag is okay now, but we'll see how it goes. More coffee. Thank you again. My name is Kate Sonka. I can't remember if I actually said that. So I'm the executive director for a nonprofit in the US called Teach Access, and I'll be sharing more about what we do there. But a little about my background. I've worked in higher ed for 12, 14 years, something like that, working both as a teaching faculty as well as faculty curriculum design and support. And so supporting faculty and thinking about teaching practice, pedagogy, especially around inclusive teaching and learning spaces. So my disciplinary background is actually in second language acquisition and thinking about language learners in our classrooms. And I've had the privilege to lead some study abroad programs to China for a couple summers and do some other types of immersive learning environment type work. So I've been working in the field of accessibility for about 10 years. Mostly it started on this teaching accessibly side, which tie into the title here today. We'll talk about teaching accessibly and teaching accessibility, a case for both. And so there is a little bit of a difference there if you aren't already picking up on that, but we'll talk through that. So I also always think it's important, I just want to acknowledge my privilege working in this space. I don't identify as having a disability, and so everything that we do, that I do, is informed by and led by people with disabilities in our organization and those that we work with. So I'm here speaking as an ally and an advocate, not as someone with personal lived experience, and also with the understanding that the disability community is not a monolith. So an experience I might have had with someone with a disability is not going to be the same as with someone else. Okay, so I think that's that for now. So agenda, I always like to kind of give a here's where we're heading. So hello and welcome, we're doing that. Getting into a little bit around the why should we teach accessibility and teach accessibly. So we'll come back to what those are. And then start to think about how could we do this? What could this look like? And then what's next? Wow, I just wrote what next. I'm going to blame jet lag for that. Feel free to laugh at that. It's okay. Okay, I think, yeah, so when we're looking at, so now we're into the hello and welcome, which I've kind of done, but at Teach Access, the work that we do, we are a nonprofit organization focused on closing what we call the accessibility technology skills gap or digital skills gap. And you can find more information about this on our website, which is teachaccess.org, O-R-G. And our goal is to really work with industry. And so I use that writ large, industry, but certainly tech companies and other types of companies who are looking for recent graduates from university who know something about accessibility. They aren't able to find enough. And so we're working really closely with universities, industry, disability organizations, and in the US, we also have some government partners in this work, both at the state and sort of local level and the federal level, really looking at how do we support educators to teach about these topics to their students in a variety of ways. And so sort of a phrase that we use a lot is that we are about teaching accessibility with efforts to support teaching accessibly. So we can't have one without the other, and we'll come back to those definitions in a moment. I know that I've teased that a moment, but just to make sure we're all on the same page about what accessibility is, if this isn't a space that some of you work in regularly. On the screen, I have a couple bullet points here. I will read those. So what is accessibility or digital accessibility? So this is the inclusive practice of removing barriers which prevent access to information and functionalities in digital content. So that's one way to think about accessibility. It also includes the design of products, devices, services, or environments for people with disabilities. Crucially important that we're centering people with disabilities, of course. And I kind of teased this a little bit, but always like to remind everyone, what is accessible to one person with a disability is not necessarily accessible to someone else with the same or different disability. And so really when we're working in this space, we want to be approaching it with a learning mindset, a growth mindset, where we're understanding things are going to change for us, and we want to start to feel comfortable if we can, but at least familiar with the space of things will change as we continue to work in this space. Okay, so as I get back to this notion of teaching accessibility and teaching accessibly, I'm gonna share a photo here, and let me just take a quick drink of water, and then I'll describe what's on the screen in an accessible practice way. Okay, thank you. So on the screen is a picture of me presenting at a conference that was in Denver in the US a few years ago now, a couple years ago. And I have a giant Venn diagram. Are people familiar with Venn diagrams? So two circles and where they intersect, great. So we were doing this similar sort of conversation around teaching accessibly and teaching accessibility and trying to make this case for both. And so we were doing a workshop with faculty, other sorts of support staff across universities in the US, and we asked them to write down examples in their mind of what do they think teaching accessibly is, what do they think teaching accessibility is, where's the overlap, that little overlap space in the Venn diagram. And I'll share sort of the two most salient points that we found. But I also want to just say, this is still the largest Venn diagram I've ever seen or been in front of. It's about as tall as me. And so if anyone finds a larger one, would love to see that someday. But to that end, as I was looking back at this information in preparation for this talk today, the two things that really came out, and apparently again, the jet lag, I'm going to blame jet lag for everything. They're so important and equal that they're both number one. There's not a number one and number two or a bulleted list here. The first one, of course, is include people with disabilities in whatever you're doing. All the way through, start to finish, every step of the way. And then the other number one, or number two, is start from the beginning and be proactive. So the idea is that when we're thinking about accessibility, let's be bringing it into the beginning of what we're doing. Let's try and be proactive, taking those steps. Yes, I think those are the highlights. I love when you uncover these little things as you're presenting, the 2 number ones. Okay, so I've been talking about this teaching accessibly and teaching accessibility. I have some definitions up on the slide here that I will read out. So for teaching accessibly, so as an instructor or faculty or teacher, you're taking action to make your learning materials and activities more accessible to your students. So this is taking the action on those materials. So some examples might be captions on your videos, lecture videos, using perhaps an accessibility checker on your syllabus, so a Microsoft Word checker, adding alternative text to your slide deck images, for example. Those are all actions we take to make our learning materials accessible. Could also include the physical accessibility of the room. So how do you set up your desks? How are you moving about? You've heard me describing what's on the screen. This is a practice of teaching accessibly. I'm not assuming what anyone can or can't see, or that they're going to get the same information that I would expect them to get. So I'm making it very clear, here's what I want you to be getting from this slide. So that's important, teaching accessibly. Teaching accessibility, which Sarah and her team and we've been working on, is you as the faculty, as the teachers, you're actually teaching these concepts and skills of digital accessibility to your students. So this could include things like introducing them to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, or WCAG, or WCAG. There's all sorts of ways people pronounce that. Maybe having them test their projects with assistive technology, depending on what type of course you're teaching. And/or teaching them how to write alternative text. So if they're presenting or submitting some type of work, are you having them look at those things? Okay, I'll pause there, move to the next section. So why should we teach accessibility and teach accessibly? People feel like this is a thing we should be doing, hopefully, in the room. Okay, so I'm going to throw some statistics at you because that's always fun to talk about. So from the World Health Organization, they estimate 1 billion, with a B, 1 billion people in this world have a disability. In the US, there are estimates from our Center for Disease Control Prevention that say 20%, 20, of our population has a disability, which means it's very, very likely you or someone you know in your immediate circle, work, family, friends, identifies as having a disability. Whether or not they're public with that of course is a conversation and decision for them to be able to share in some cases. But the thing about it is that it's self-reported, right? There are certain types of disabilities that are more perceivable than others, that you might be able to perceive them by interacting with someone. Many disabilities are not. And because, at least in the US, people are not required to disclose their disability, students are not required. I believe that's the same here. We don't always know the exact number of students with disabilities in our classes, for example. Or faculty or colleagues that we work with. So it's really important that we're thinking about accessibility because it's affecting everyone around us and has the ability to positively affect people. Let's see. Okay, so to help illustrate this, and before I walk through this, I'm going to take another sip of water. Thank you. Okay, so up on the screen, this is from the Microsoft Inclusive Design Kit. It's a graph of essentially demonstrating this notion that any one of us could develop or have a disability at any point in our lives, either permanently, situationally, or temporarily. Has anyone seen this before? This? Okay, so some have, some haven't. So I am still going to walk through it just to make sure we're all on the same page here. This doesn't mean that it's a complete example, set of examples. I'm sure we could come up with others, and I welcome that feedback, of course, but I'm going to describe really quickly what's here. So there's 3 columns, and those columns are permanent, temporary, situational. Then there's 4 rows. So we have touch, see, hear, and speak. Again, this is not exhaustive of types of disabilities or situations, but what it's meant to demonstrate is how we can have a disability at any point, or someone we know. So I will read across. So again, it goes permanent, temporary, situational. For touch, we have 1 arm. Temporary is arm injury. Situational is new parent. And so the idea here, especially if we're looking in that temporary or situational column, is that maybe you break your arm, and so for some amount of time, you only have the use of 1 arm. Situational, of course, is maybe meant to be much shorter. Here they're saying a new parent, the graphic image, or the image shows someone holding a baby. In that moment or moments, you're only able to do something with 1 arm as you're holding a baby. And I will read through the rest here. For permanent C, we have blind, temporary, cataract, situational, distracted driver. That's never been any of us, right? For here, under permanent, we have deaf, temporary, ear infection, situational bartender. And then under permanent for speak, we have nonverbal, temporary is laryngitis, and situational is heavy accent. Now, I'm sure we could pick apart any of these, but just for the sake of understanding how disability can be fluid for people, I think it's important to bring us back to that. Okay, so that helps us understand that we have a variety of learners in our classrooms and colleagues that might have a disability, but why should we teach it to them also? So we want both, right? And so I'm going to go to the next slide here. In 2022, so it's a couple years old now, but at Teach Access, we ran an updated sort of survey questionnaire from some colleagues that had done it a few years before on this notion of the accessible technology skills gap. So this idea that organizations, industry, companies are looking for students who know something about accessibility but can't find enough. So what we have up on the screen are some of sort of the key findings, and you can find this white paper on our website. But 75% of respondents, and so this included people from industry, it included people from higher ed, but included people from disability organizations, sort of all types of organizations, but people who are in positions to hire, right? So they're in a position within the organization to have an impact on who's coming in. 75% of those respondents saw a moderate to significant increase for employees with accessibility skills in their organizations in the last 5 years. And so that means that these organizations are seeing an increase, moderate or significant, to looking for employees who have these skills. 86% of them said they anticipate the demand for accessibility skills to increase. That's a big percent. 86% are saying, yeah, you know what? We need people who have these skills. We need more. And only 2%, 2% said it's easy for their organization to find candidates with accessibility skills. So when we're thinking about these percentages, so we're saying 86% are saying, hey, we're gonna need more. There's a demand, we need more. We need more graduates, recent graduates, people who know about this, but only 2% said it's easy for us to find them. So that's a big gap, right? So there's one other bit of data here that I'll share. Again, it's a couple years old. This is from Wiley. And Wiley is a US organization that sort of tracks different things around what's happening in higher ed. But in 2022, August of 2022, they did a survey of 5,200, more than 5,200 students and more than 2,400 instructors in North America about factors that impact student success. And so student success is, to me, a key word. Sarah and I have had a lot of good conversations about it, and I think I've already spoken with some of you about it. But thinking about student success in our classrooms. In this data, 1/4 or 25% of those students suggested that lessons with real-world applications including those grounded in experiential learning, would improve their engagement. So now we're talking about student success and engagement in our classrooms, and what will get them excited to learn. What's getting them interested in what we're doing in the classroom? A quarter of them are saying, we'd love some real-world applications. Okay. 81% of those students, that's a big number, said it's important or very important for institutions to incorporate company-led projects to mimic real-world work. So that's interesting. So in addition to them saying, and again, North America from 2 years ago, but still probably pretty relevant, saying, hey, in addition to I want real-world, I would love to be able to interact with some companies directly about the work that I'm doing, to start to understand what is this going to look like for me as I leave the institution. And then one little additional bit here, the main factors driving students toward a particular major, so this is in the US, the area of study, what they're majoring in, were their interest in the field, that's 57%, career opportunities at 46%, and their ability to make a positive impact in that field at 41%. So these are some pretty good size percentage points of students saying, hey, I'm really looking for something that I'm interested in, that has career opportunities for me, and that makes a positive impact. And so, how could we teach accessibility? This is a good space to start to have this conversation. When we're thinking about students are asking to maybe have some of these experiences. We know hiring managers, industry people, are looking for students who have some of this experience. Let's start teaching them about accessibility. In addition to doing the accessible instructional stuff that we all do, let's think about how we can bring students into that. And so this is really where Teach Access sits, and I've kind of given a quick overview, but I'll read out our vision statement. So Teach Access, we envision a future where technology is born accessible and inclusive for people with disabilities. So that is our vision. We see this. This is what we are looking for. Some information about our organization, which I think I mostly hit upon, but we are US based. We were founded in 2016. Sort of the key to our success, if you will, is that we are a collaboration, active and engaged and ongoing, between educational institutions, industry, government, and disability/accessibility organizations. I've talked about this quite a bit, but our focus is really on how do we support faculty and educators to teach about accessibility and support their efforts to teach accessibly. And I think one of the most exciting things is that everything we do is free. So we are not interested in putting up that financial barrier for providing resources and training for faculty to be able to engage in this. And so some additional information about the work that we've done and its impact. Thus far, we've reached 745,000 students and counting. There's different ways, and we can dive into that a little bit later perhaps, but different levels of reach that we've had with students. We've engaged more than 270 educational institutions, mostly higher education still. And as we continue into the next year and our new 3-year strategic plan, we'll be looking at how to support K-12 as well. We've given out more than $350,000 US dollars to faculty to support them in helping create and participate in this work. And we have, I think it's actually closer to 350 curricular items available for teaching accessibility. Again, those are free. So, how are we addressing the accessibility skills gap? So I mentioned, cool, I threw some numbers at you. Here's some of the impact we've had. You might be thinking, okay, well, how do you actually do it? I'm gonna take a quick sip of water again, sorry, as I get through the next couple slides. Okay. So we have a variety of programs and resources. I'm just gonna highlight a few. And up on the screen are some essentially screenshots if you'll allow it, the shortcut I took here, of social media posts that we've used to highlight these programs at a glance. And so I will describe what's up here on the screen. So the first one, this one is really focused on the programs we have for students. And so we have a program called Student Academy and a program called Student Ambassadors. And so the Academy is really drop in, listen, learn from accessibility experts and other types of teams. We're shifting it a little bit, and on the bottom of the screen it says coming February 2025, Student Academy. Instead of spreading it out over months, once a month, we're going to do sort of a consolidated 2 half-day thing. You're all invited, your students are invited, it's free, so stay tuned for that. It would be your afternoon, but not too late for everyone over here. But this is a chance for students to hear directly from industry and start to understand what's happening, what should I know. Student ambassadors we have on pause right now, but we intend to bring back. But this is where we have a longer engagement with students, and they're becoming ambassadors on their own campuses to tell their fellow students about this work, and maybe even encourage some of their faculty to start teaching about this. So those are student programs. And I would say, I've been trying to put percentages around this. I think about 20% of our work is probably direct for students, and 80% or so would be for faculty and educators. And that really comes down to the sustainability factor. Of course, if we're working with a faculty person, they're teaching semester after semester, or term after term, new students, versus if we were only working with students directly, we've reached a student once and they're going and they're graduating. So, but it's important for us to maintain both, because we need to know, kind of going back to that earlier slide from the Wiley survey, what motivates students, what are they interested in, what kind of connections can we help make? So that's sort of our balance. So when we get into some of the programs for faculty and educators, one is our fellowship program. And so this is a program where we work with faculty over the course of a calendar year, and we take them from, I'm new to accessibility, I don't know about it, to here's what it looks like in your discipline, and how, as UX, how does it appear there? Maybe your computer programming, computer science, what does it look like there? Graphic design, etc. Technical writing. So we start to help faculty situate it within their discipline, and then by the end, they're advocates too. And so they're thinking about, okay, well, this is how I'm going to teach it and how I'm going to talk to my colleagues and encourage them to start thinking about this. An additional one is our Teach Access Grants program. So this is a little less, a lot less in terms of direct support. It's more, maybe you have an idea of what you'd want to teach about accessibility in your course, and this funding helps support your time and recognize the time and effort to create new material. One piece that I haven't mentioned yet, I don't think, we really are looking at where faculty are right now. We're really looking at where can you fit this into a course you're already teaching. For some faculty, we've seen that be 5 minutes at the end of every class. Does anyone have a cool accessibility thing they want to share? Or a cool topic about assistive tech? Or I read this article that I want to tell you all about related to accessibility. And that's it. That's all that they've introduced in a semester, because that's all they had the time for, right? Curriculum is so tight, it's hard sometimes to figure out, how do I put this in my course? But that's a start. 5 minutes each class, or once a week, or whatever, where it wasn't before, that's a start. We've also had faculty who've said, I'm going to swap out this assignment that I was doing with one where it's really focused on accessibility. Or, what I can do right now is have my students make sure their materials are accessible as they submit them to me. And so you spend a little time just letting students know what that means, and then that's what you do. So all the way up to, we've had people change entire modules in their course or add weeks of content. But we really are looking at what can you do now, with the understanding that it takes time to change curriculum. We also really believe everyone should know about it, and so students should hear about it in various classes. So if we got to the point where we were saying, oh, it's just one class over here, it's an elective, well, a student could elect not to take it, and then they would still not learn about it. Or I took that one class and now I'm done with it. I don't have to think about it in relation to these other things. So we're really trying to encourage faculty to think about where can it appear a few times. And so that's really what the faculty grants are as well, is an opportunity for faculty to say, yeah, I think I could change that one slide deck that I use. I'm going to spend some time over the summer working on that. And then it goes into our curriculum repository. So up on the screen, I've now switched to Teach Access resources. Again, everything is free. Everything is free. You can find all of this stuff. And in fact, in the grants and the fellowship, we provide funding for faculty. Right now, it's still US faculty, sorry, but I'm here to figure out how can I help you all here. So in terms of resources, we have our curriculum repository. And so this is, like I said, I think we're now above 350 items. It's an open educational resource, or OER, under a Creative Commons license, so you can use in your classroom. And it includes things like assignments, lessons, presentations, syllabi, discussions, videos, resources, etc., that are there for you to go and look at, adapt how you need to into your own teaching so that you can start to do this work in your class. The next one that we have up here is our Accessibility Skills Hiring Toolkit. So although I wouldn't call our organization fully workforce development, we're a part of that conversation, right? Because we're really looking at bridging this gap. And so to that end, sort of one of the bridges we've built in terms of resources is this hiring toolkit. And so again, free toolkit, it's on our website, and it's meant for people who are looking to hire, could be university, could be industry, some really common job descriptions. So front-end developer, UX researcher, etc. There's about a dozen, I think, right now, about 12, maybe 14. And it's questions that you could add, or requirements, I should say, to your job descriptions. So if you're coming in as a front-end developer, we would probably want you to know about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or be able to do sort of some of these basic things. And so it's meant to give you sort of a jump start, if you will, for your own job descriptions, to copy paste into your listings, your postings. And we do also have questions. So we know from our industry partners, especially the big ones, and all size, I guess, who's asking, who's doing the hiring, at least initially, isn't always the team that the person would end up on. And so we've provided some questions as well that you could give to your hiring teams, committees, to say, ask these questions, and if they kind of answer something around here, that would be great. So really, really good tool as well for thinking about how to help prepare your students in disciplines. Hey, you know what? Because this is created in partnership with industry. So when industry is looking for a front-end developer, they think it'd be great if you knew these couple things. Let's talk about that. And then the last one up here, am I doing okay on time, by the way? Okay. The last one up here, and I'm almost done, is our self-paced accessibility courses. Again, free. This is self-paced, as it says, and we have some discipline areas listed up here. But this is for you as educators, and students could come in, but really it's designed with you as educators in mind to help you start to understand, what would I teach in my course? Okay, so you have the repository where there's actual materials, great, take a look, use it. But some might be in the position of, I see what you're saying, but I don't really know where I would start to put this into my course, or what that could look like. These are meant to help with that. And so each one is about 2 modules. I think our Introduction to Disability and Accessible Design is actually 3 modules. But it's really meant for you to spend time learning about these topics in your discipline, and some time reflecting, okay, well, where could I start to make these changes in my course? And then maybe even help get you on the path of, here's where you can go for more information, here's what that could look like. And so these are always free and open, ongoing. It's really up to when you want to look at them. Okay, so what next? Or what's next, I guess, either way. Okay, so of course, be an advocate. If you're interested in doing this work, you can be an advocate in your own space wherever you are. Of course, I've shared some materials that we have in the US, and part of me being here and being able to work with Sarah is getting to understand what does it mean for us to support more of what's happening here, what types of materials do and don't work for you all, what would we need to create, what does it look like to do this work. So this is an area of growth. If you're interested, we welcome you to be a part of these conversations. But if you're wondering, great, I want to be an advocate, but how do I start to talk about these things maybe? Up on the screen I have a couple what I call methods of appeal that I use and have used with faculty and administrators and all types of people across the institution for getting them to think about doing this, right? I don't want to say care, because generally people do care. It's more okay, when do I put this into my schedule? So I always love to start with student success, because in my experience at least, it's hard for a faculty member to look at me and say, I don't care about doing this. Usually it's, where do I fit this in? I don't know how to start this. What do I do? So if I talk about student success and, hey, you want your students to be successful while they're here and when they go elsewhere, wherever they're going next. We know that industry is looking for this. Student success, that one is a good one. Thumbs up to that. Another one is talking about social and disability justice. Oh boy. So again, this doesn't mean that all of these are maybe useful to you in your position, but in thinking about who you're talking to, the college that I worked at was our College of Arts and Humanities. So I was, of course, surrounded by many people thinking about justice in different ways. And so that, for me, was one of the ways I could work with faculty there, was thinking about social justice, disability justice. Maybe that works for you. Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. Have people heard of this before? We could spend a whole bunch of time talking about UDL, but it's not exhaustive in terms of accessibility. There's still a lot to do even after you've implemented some UDL practices, but it really is meant to be a starting point for your materials to think about how can I create learning environments that could work for many of my students? What am I doing in that space? And so that might be a way. Maybe you're someone who works with faculty and thinking about teaching practice. Community impact, you might call it something different here. There's all sorts of ways to talk about it, but outreach, we use that word in the US a lot. Thinking about the impact that we will have and can have when we have more students graduating and designing with accessibility in mind. Think about the impact on the community writ large, but specifically also on the community of people with disabilities. I never like to lead with the legal, which is why it's towards the end, but sometimes the legal works. In the US, we are very litigious. We love to sue things and people, and sometimes that's just what gets people motivated, right? I don't like to lead with that just because from a personal standpoint, I think that's not the best way to encourage people to do this, but sometimes that works. So of course in the US, we have the Americans with Disabilities Act, and there's a whole bunch of things around discrimination and anti-discrimination. And so sometimes for certain people within an institution, that's what will catch their ear, especially if they're in your legal office of general counsel, or in a position where they would have to respond to a lawsuit. This is one of the methods. And business, I put down here, business or ROI, return on investment. So this notion of being accessible is just good business. It creates more space for more people to buy your product if that's what you're doing, or participate in your learning activities in terms of attracting students to come to your university, broadening your staff and your faculty pool if you're making these spaces more accessible. So legal and business are not always what I like to lead with, but we have to recognize that there are people motivated by different things, either personally or based on their role in the institution. And then I have a ... question mark because you all might have your own, so we'll come back to that. Think on it if you have ideas. And I think I'm getting to the end here. So again, my most important list of 2 number 1 items. So clearly that was a copy from earlier. Include people with disabilities in whatever you're doing. No matter what you're doing, we have to make sure that we are in community with each other. And then the other number 1, remember to start from the beginning and be proactive. So we talked about some smaller steps you could take. And then I do like to end with one more. I think I mentioned this before, sort of this idea of we're never really done with accessibility, right? It's ongoing. So how can we build it into what we're doing and really begin to view it or continue viewing it as a space for innovation in teaching? How are we creating more spaces for students? How are we creating more learning opportunities for students to go out into a world that is looking for this? And then, consider connecting with us or with Sarah as we figure out our next global steps, as we're figuring out what it's going to look like for us to be able to support the work that's happening here already and be able to bring in more of you and your colleagues. And I think that's it. And then thank you. And then up on the screen is our website again. It's teachaccess.org. I think I got it. All right.